Okay, let's kick off. So, hello and welcome to our first edition of the ECI Unlocked series this year. So this is kind of where we sort of share knowledge across sort of our portfolio and friends of the firm. Today we're covering how to get the most out of M&A. So I'm Skyler Bruggen. Some of you, actually quite a number of you on this call will have worked with me before, but for those of you who haven't, I'm a director at ECI Partners and head of portfolio M&A. So basically where the businesses we back are interested in making acquisitions, I'm there along with my team to support in making this happen. And really we call this a toolkit or menu of services to use as needed as part of a range of other things we can do and help with at ECI to help businesses grow organically and inorganically. So that is a bit of the ECI pitch. I had to do it. I will hand over to our panelists shortly to introduce themselves, because I know that is why you guys are here. But before I do that, just some Zoom housekeeping. So if you do have any questions as we go through, if you wouldn't mind putting those in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. My colleague Brett will be keeping an eye on this, and we should, if all goes according to plan, have 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the session for some Q&A. So over to introductions then. Paul, should we start with you, and then Andy and Brett, just to introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Skyler. Hi, I'm Paul. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of Commify. We're a relatively recent investment by ECI in November last year. We're a business messaging company. So as Chief Strategy Officer, I lead all of our M&A and our long-term strategy. My background with the business actually started as a private equity investor in 2013 when I was at Darwin Private Equity, and we backed the first buyout of the business from its founders. And I enjoyed it so much that I joined the business directly about a year later. So over 10 or 11 years, I've been leading our M&A and long-term strategy.
And Andy, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Skyler. So I'm Andrew Collis. I'm the CFO at Moneypenny. I've been in the business 3 years or so, and Moneypenny's been in the ECI stable for about 5 years now. Last 15 years, I've worked in private equity-backed companies, all but one's done M&A and various different bolt-ons and acquisitions. So got quite a bit of experience in this area.
Great, Brett.
Great. My name is Brett. I'm a principal and ECI's North American growth specialist. I run our New York office, and anytime one of our portfolio companies is thinking about or looking for support to turbocharge their growth in North America, whether by acquisition or organically, I'm here to support.
Great. So kicking off then with a bit of background, it'd be good to just have some background on your M&A experience in the past. I know you sort of touched on it, but just what have been some of the acquisitions you've worked on previously? Andy, should we start with you?
Yeah, probably start pre-Moneypenny and then work back to Moneypenny if that's okay, Skyler. So prior to Moneypenny, a business called NES Global Talent, we did quite a few acquisitions across the US, Canada, Norway. So yeah, quite a lot there, often to give international scale, which again Brett touched on then. And then from a Moneypenny perspective, we've done a few acquisitions. So 2018, business acquired companies Made Simple Group in London, which is a company registration business agents. So that was in 2018, and since then there've been 3 acquisitions in the US, really to drive that and accelerate that growth in the US. We already had a business in the US, Moneypenny US, which was from 2014. But what's really helped is that M&A's helps accelerate that growth, that scale, acquisition of customers, and actually acquisition of good staff and talent as well.
Great. Paul, would you mind picking up next?
Sure. So Commify is a long-term private equity-backed consolidator in the business messaging space. As I said before, 6 months with ECI, but we've done 2 rounds of private equity ownership before that. So from 2013 to 2017, we were backed by Darwin Private Equity, and then from 2017 through to last year by HG's Mercury Fund, so their kind of small cap fund. And it's been a buy and build throughout that period. So we've done 16 bolt-on acquisitions alongside 10 years of organic growth over that period. And we've grown the business from when we started this journey with Darwin at 10 million revenue and 1 million EBITDA. We've scaled up to about 160 million revenue and about 25 million of EBITDA. So, but again, that's been, it's been organic growth and M&A growth. In terms of the acquisitions, so we've done 16 bolt-ons. Mostly this has been small deals and mostly across Europe. So to give some flavour, which is I think really relevant for, mostly from founders, right? So, but we've done deals, lots of deals in the UK, but I've also done acquisitions in Spain, Germany, Italy, France, Netherlands, and also the US, which of course is very exciting for us and with Brett here, that's great. I guess our most recent 3 deals, spring, we entered the Dutch or the Benelux market with an acquisition of a leading player there. That was quite a big deal for us. And I'll talk about that one again later when we talk about earnouts. We bought in the US in 2022 a business called Seedine Services, again, a pretty big deal for us. And another example, our last acquisition was Voodoo SMS, which was a sort of a high-performing competitor, small competitor in the UK. So there are some of the examples of what we've done.
Great, thanks. And Brett, finally, hand over to you.
Yeah, of course. And my role really is to support our businesses in terms of where they need additional pair of hands or where they can use some additional advisory support for their M&A strategy. So, Andy can certainly talk about, how we've sort of worked with Moneypenny. We do a little bit of that initial outreach and triaging of targets just because the US, there's such a massive, map of, of founder-led businesses in this space. Really want to, sort of find and qualify, some of those opportunities, before Andy and his team get involved. PeopleSafe in our portfolio is another great example where we help support in terms of outreach and triaging, but we also, as we started getting closer to identifying some targets that had progressed, really help thinking about what that growth planning looks like in the US. So on the back of an acquisition, and they did make a North American acquisition, OK Alone, in August of last year. On the back of that, we have some of that thinking and strategy in place as far as how we're going to invest marketing dollar, how we're going to focus on particular end markets in the US, so we can then really use that acquisition as a base to turbocharge growth in a new geography. So those are 2 good examples, but there's a number of different ways that we can sort of plug in and really help Andy, Paul, or management from any of the businesses that we support.
I remember you were even sort of attending trade fairs at one point, particularly previously when Brett first came on board, it was during COVID, so the rest of us couldn't get over to the States. So Brett subbed in a few times.
Yeah, I do. I can do some advanced scouting. So if you want to send somebody to a conference first to see if it's worth the sort of investment of time and money, I'm always happy to do that for our businesses.
Oh, that's good. I think I know you've talked about the acquisitions from for Moneypenny and Commify, but when we think about acquisition strategy, how has that evolved, changed over the years? Sort of, Paul, maybe if you sort of pick up first, because I think Commify has been a sort of an acquirer for some time now.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with what hasn't changed, and what hasn't changed is our laser focus on businesses that address our core segment. So for us, that's the local enterprise segment. So we want to have great go-to-market across the countries, which is a local presence for local businesses. So that's not changed at all. We've stayed really true to that the whole time. And actually, within our overall sector, one of our differentiators is that has been where we've been focused. So we've got a much more sort of consistent performance than some of our peer group that focus on, say, global customers or wholesale, for example. What probably has changed a little bit is deal size, actually. So we've started doing fewer but larger deals that move the needle, and probably our appetite for paying up for growth. So I think that's changed. A piece of this is really related to our life cycle. So particularly under HG's ownership, we were really keen to do quite a lot of small deals, and that made a lot of sense. But actually, towards the end of our time, we did begin to focus more on those larger deals, and that's going to be our strategy going forward, really, is those needle moving larger deals. So that's probably, yeah, that's the key thing that's changed.
Yeah. And Andy, sort of a Moneypenny again, sort of any comment on how sort of strategy has evolved or not?
Yeah, from 2018, when the business bought Made Simple, it was almost a complementary acquisition to really fire up leads into our UK business, which it has done really well. And then the strategy, particularly in respect to the US, right? The US, we weren't, and actually, as I said before, it's helped accelerate that scale. So we purchased a business called Voice Nation in 2020, and with that came 3,000 customers. Previously, we had about 1,000 customers in the US, so suddenly it quadrupled the size of the business. And then since then, we've done another one in the US, and we're working on one now, both in that telephone answering virtual receptionist segments. Slightly different customer cohorts, so one that's skewed towards medical, and that's not a place where we've been in the past, so it actually opens up that medical market for us, which is somewhere we'd like to be. So that's really how the strategy has evolved.
Great. And then sort of big question to start off with then, sort of major lessons, things you would change if you were starting out again? Because I know we've got some people on this call who won't have done any acquisitions before, some who've done a few, but just kind of reflecting on that. And Andy, I'll come back to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think first thing is very much aligned on that strategy, both as a management team and then with the board. Working on deals is time consuming. You can put an awful lot of work into them, and actually they can just fall away. So there's no point wasting time. You've got to be really aligned. So you know, those open, honest discussions with the management team, where you want to go, where's the growth going to come from, and then can we execute against it? And then once you've worked that through as a management team, then getting the board on side is key. A second lesson is really keep the board up to date. So non-execs have varying views. I think keeping them in a loop month to month, and actually in between board meetings, where you're up to, dealing with any queries, questions they've got is really important. And for the last 2.5 years, we've had an M&A page in the board pack, just certain targets, where we're up to in the conversations, and it just keeps everyone abreast of where we are. So I think that's really important, just no surprises. And I think the other lesson is just identifying internal resource that can work with you, because again, it does take work, and if it's just yourself, it's a lot of work and a lot of burden. So actually, I've got a couple of people that assist me in the team, and actually, as Brett said, we've utilised ECI in the resource, both Brett, Skyler, Victoria, in terms of narrowing down targets and helping us qualify targets. So in the US, there's several hundred providers of what we do. It's a broad spectrum, and actually narrowing down that, and actually what is our de minimis criteria, what do we want to look at, and then how do we go around instigating conversations with these people. So yeah, that last one of like, get help where you can, and utilize it, and be clear what you need.
Yeah. And Paul, what, you're okay to sort of go next, and then sort of Brett, if you sort of finish off on this one.
Yeah, I guess in response to what Andy was just saying, having done this for 10 years here, I can only endorse everything he said around bringing everyone on the journey with you, but at the right time. So a careful balance we have is, at what point do you distract a lot of people with M&A, and actually it's not too early, otherwise it is a big distraction, because any deal's got a fairly high percentage chance of not happening. And also, as Andy said, you could get right to the end, and the right decision for the business is to say no and walk away from the wrong deal. So it does take a lot of effort and just a lot of distraction for the team. From my side, in terms of what we would change if we were starting out again, I think it's actually the last topic I think today is going to be around integration. Really, I think it is around integration and knowing that to do M&A properly, depending on how many deals and the size of deals you want to do. So whether it's 1 or 2 tactical deals or an M&A program, really making sure that you've got the right resources for integration, accountable for the delivery. And so I guess big picture, rather than relying on the best people in your business to find a way of getting integration done on their Friday afternoons, I think that isn't really scalable. So you do need dedication resources on integration to deliver success after a deal. That's probably my biggest learning. And we've evolved our model on integration, and a great thing now with ECI's backing is we're sort of building out that integration team alongside our ambitions of getting deals done.
Yeah, that's an important one. We'll come on there. And Brett, finally, I guess sort of personally, also sort of, you know, from an ECI angle.
Yeah, this is a very tactical one. It's building on something that that Andy mentioned. So, you know, several hundred, largely founder sort of led sort of telephone answering businesses in the US. How do you kind of build sort of salience so that when you do some of that outreach, you know, you get a response and, you know, you quickly qualify for potential opportunities to add to the pipeline? I think we've found a lot of success with Moneypenny on the back of industry conferences, especially those where, you know, where Moneypenny has an active presence. We get a lot more responsiveness to that outreach and a lot more interest from businesses potentially looking to be acquired, you know, on the back of events like that. So being very strategic as far as how you do your outreach for potential targets in your space.
Yeah, and from a sort of ECI perspective, if you go back a few years, we didn't actually have any sort of additional support to offer in a formalized way. And actually, if you look now, since about 2019, when we did start offering kind of the extra resource, we've averaged about sort of 11 acquisitions across the portfolio a year, which is just sort of a real difference. Otherwise, you know, leaving it just to, you know, management team can be sort of quite a lot of work, as you said, Andy. It takes up a lot of time, particularly when deals don't happen. So let's move on then to unlocking and winning. On the market and off market deals often get sort of spoken about. What are the differences, and do you sort of differentiate in your approach? Paul, should we start with you?
Yeah, happily. I think everyone loves off-market deals, right? That's always the nirvana, what you're aiming at. But let's be practical. It's not always possible, and as try as we might, you can't twist someone's arm to sell you their business if they're not ready to. So really, I think for us, it's around building the long-term relationships. So whether you do get the opportunity to do something off-market, or it does turn into an on-market process of some sort, whether that's a narrow process running you against your competitor or a full sale process, the better job you've done of identifying a business early, building relationship with our owners, not being pushy along the way, I found that that's the best chance of success, whether or not it's on or off market. So I think what I say a lot to business owners is that we recognize you only sell your business once, right? This is my day job, buying businesses, and I've been fortunate to do a number of acquisitions in my career, but this is not normal for the people you're dealing with. It's very much abnormal, and most of them are far away from their comfort zone. So having that empathy and that relationship you want to be their favorite destination, their favorite owner for their business. But when you build that relationship, I think it puts you in a really good place, irrespective of what the method of a sale process looks like.
Yeah. And Andy, on market, off market?
Yeah, more the same from as Paul said. So we really try and develop those off market opportunities. There are competitors in our marketplace that are very acquisitive. So that relationship and that connection is so important. Brett mentioned about industry conferences, and actually there's one we're working on at the moment which actually came about from an industry conference 18 months ago. and Joanna, who's our chief exec, presenting, and actually went, oh, wow, that sounds interesting. And with ECI, we reached out to the attendees about 6 weeks later, and actually resulted in conversations which have evolved, which has been great. So that relationship and having a good standing in the industry and people respecting what you do is really important.
Yeah, and I think that Paul, you touched on this as well about sort of being the favourite destination. But a question which I find often comes up is actually how do you turn a conversation, a good conversation, particularly off market, into a deal? Any advice there, sort of, Andy, if you wouldn't mind starting?
So if you build a relationship, and again, I find meeting people in person makes a big difference, particularly the US, and actually you've made the effort to go and see them in person. I've had the same in other countries as well. You go and see them in person and you build that connection. That's massive. And then as that evolves, I mean, for me, just being honest with them and telling them that you admire their business, and planting that seed. And if it's not now, and it's 2, 3, 4 years down the line, then great. But it's putting yourself in that good position. And the one we completed on Alpha Page in a business called Alpha Page in Colorado in 2022. Actually, the first conversation there happened about 3.5 years prior. A couple of conversations then, it then went quiet, and actually the vendor then reached out to us, the family reached out to us in late 2021, and then completed that deal in mid-22. So just shows that piece around relationship.
Yeah, and anything sort of to add there, Paul?
No, I think we're saying a lot of the same things. It's about patience. You need to understand their motivation.
Yeah.
Don't rush them. Another thing from our side, which I think really helps with particularly entrepreneurs, is we structure each deal differently. Or particularly we structure each deal, we start with a blank sheet of paper. What is the desired outcome of the seller? What works for us, and really craft a structure. And we've often, the structures we hypothesize early with founders are the ones we end up delivering, and not wavering from that. That's been successful for us. Also, like Andy, just to give some context, so of our deals, I think 80% of the deals we've completed come from a long-term, as in a more than 2-year relationship, knowing the businesses before. So 20% we didn't know about the business before, some form of approach. And then of those 80% long-term relationships, half have ended up being a process, and half we've managed to do off-market. So hopefully that gives some sort of context of the success rate of building those relationships, but just to show where our deals have come from.
Yeah, it goes both ways, doesn't it? On one level, it's the relationship allows you to kind of feel if there's a cultural fit well ahead of any sort of transaction, but also I think it helps you build conviction as a potential acquirer, so you know that if there is a process, this is a business that you're going to need to sort of pay up for or sort of compete against others with. So let's move on then to just, again, kind of going back to some of the businesses on the school who maybe haven't started their M&A journey, and think about sort of resourcing. So from this perspective, how you've got a fluid pipeline, bolt-on pipeline, and a full-on day job. So how would you advise a business kind of to think about that? So Paul, if it's okay if I go back to you, and then maybe sort of Brett.
Fine. Well, our context is maybe a little bit different to some other businesses. So look, we've done 16 deals in 10 years and probably looked in detail at another 15 or 20 without me doing it as this is my day job. And so without the dedicated resource, I don't think it would be possible. So I guess I'd start by saying, well, look, try and understand what are your ambitions on M&A, and what is your strategy? Is it going to be opportunistic 1 or 2 deals, or are you looking to run an M&A program? And if it's the latter, you're going to need to resource accordingly, because it's a lot of work. And I guess as people are reflecting on that, certainly from our experience of ECI, and we really liked hearing this, through the process of getting to know ECI. I think ECI is quite rare as an investor that actually can offer a menu of support, as Skyler, you introduced at the start of the call. I think you really do roll your sleeves up with the portfolio companies to support their M&A ambitions, however that may lie, from a one-off through to a program. So I would definitely recommend anyone new to this to leverage the ECI relationship and firepower and experience of how to build the right team or how to support on the deals themselves.
Thank you, Paul. Take that compliment. Brett, sort of anything to sort of add, and then sort of Andy, I know, again, Moneypenny has a different model again, so it'd be good to sort of pick up afterwards.
Yeah, and Paul sold did some of the selling, so I don't have to in terms of the M&A toolkit. I think the only piece I'll sort of add to that, it is very menu based. So for some of our businesses, they may want more the help in terms of building that market map of acquisition opportunities and doing some of that initial outreach and triaging. In some cases, businesses may have a smaller market map or may be able to handle that part, but they need a little bit more help on the diligence side. The nice thing I think about how ECI presents its options within M&A is that it really is a menu that you can pick and choose from. I mean, even the PeopleSafe example that I gave at the beginning of this call, what they really wanted is someone to start thinking about and working on the growth plan post acquisition, post that first North American acquisition. So that was also something the commercial team was able to support on. So I think it's that optionality that I think can be quite helpful for management teams that aren't sort of fully resourced on the M&A side, and that's what we try to to be helpful to offer the teams that we work with.
And Andy, I know, well, you've got a full-time job in addition, so kind of probably end with you there. How do you resource it?
Yeah, I'm envious of Paul, to be honest. But look, yeah, it's that, isn't it? And it is hard sometimes to find time. You end up tied up with other things, and M&A can always become the last thing on the list. So it is keeping up there. A great thing we've done is we just have monthly calls on M&A, and we actually involve yourself, Skyler, in those, and Brett. So we just keeps it on track, makes everyone accountable. So it stays up there in terms of the agenda and the radar, and gradually we move through what we try and do. So it's no one's full-time job. It's myself and then Mark and David in the finance team that assist me pre-acquisition. But yeah, I think holding each other accountable is really important. If you don't have someone, 12 months time, we do start to look at that full-time dedicated person. I can see that evolving, and that would be a really nice place to be. But yeah, it's just carve out some time and do put time into it, because then it does pay off in the long run.
And sort of finally, on this sort of unlocking winning side, earnouts. I know we've sort of spoken about this previously, but what role would you say earnouts play in structuring a deal, and particularly any examples of where you've seen them work really well, not so well? Andy, back to you maybe to start off with.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, and that is our default, is to have an earnout in there. And I suppose it depends on the nature of the industry. It works very well with a recurring revenue model. So revenues are generally pretty stable. So actually having something in there, either on a revenue or profit earnout perspective, works really well. Again, customer base and recurring revenue is king for us. So we're very comfortable around the revenue earnout, because once we've acquired a business, we can see the cost base, we know what's going on, we can control it. So making sure those customers are happy and sticky from the people, the vendors of the business, who knows those as the best. It's actually interesting. The deal we're working on at the moment, there's not a revenue earnout. That's the one we've not been able to get it agreed on. And the vendor's going to retire within 6 months, so we're going to have almost like a business transition checklist, which we'll work through over a 6-month period, and subject to success of that and completion of that, then there is some purchase price assigned to that. But I think overall, yeah, big fan of revenue earnout. But I'm keen to hear from Paul, because it sounds like he's got some other mechanisms as well, so that'll be interesting.
All over to you.
Well, and before you go, as you're providing your answer, can you help define what an earnout is for some of our audience members? We've gotten a question on that.
Was that to me?
Yes, please.
Okay, fine. So I guess, look, what is an earnout? I guess strategically, it is if I sort of was to open page 70 of the corporate finance textbook, I'm sure it would say something like an earnout is a tool to bridge a gap in valuations, particularly for high growth businesses. So if they're doing profit or revenue of X at the moment and Y, which is going to be 30-40% bigger in a year or two, then it's a tool to kind of give the vendor value for that future growth without having to pay for it on day one when it doesn't yet deserve that valuation. So it's a way of bridging a value gap, but also should the business underperform, you don't end up overpaying. So that's the tool, and it definitely works. But also its strength is its weakness, an earnout. So earnouts are structured to drive behavior, hopefully positive behavior. They definitely drive behavior, but if they're structured the wrong way, they can drive the wrong behavior. So and I was interested to hear what Andy said there. In a market with very recurring revenue, an earnout is well suited. But in a market, if you have, say, for example, more flighty or one-off revenue, then you could have a seller driving low quality revenue to hit an earnout, and that revenue doesn't come back the next year. So you end up overpaying, and then you're left with the wrong shape of business. So from my experience, I use earnouts cautiously, sparingly, but they've been wonderful when done properly, and they definitely merit really careful structuring. So I was writing before this. So we've done, I think, 3. 2 of them have worked and 1 didn't. One of them worked because the business plan was bonkers and they were never going to hit it. So we were happy to give an earnout away that we knew we weren't going to pay. So that was fine. It worked, but not for us. In one of them, it was a small competitor in a country we were present in, and it ended up driving slightly the wrong behavior where we ended up competing with ourselves. So we sort of quickly ripped it up, struck a separate deal and said, look, let's stop that. So in that case, it didn't work. And generally, I would be very cautious using an earnout if a business is present in a market you already are. I'd absolutely, probably almost certainly wouldn't use an earnout in those circumstances. But where it worked perfectly for us is in a new country for us, a high growth business, and the owners, importantly, they wanted to partner with us and they wanted to stay for a number of years. So actually that worked really well. So, and to give you some color, the earnout ended up hitting their 2-year business plan, and the earnout ended up being 40% of the deal value. So it really did drive, and it was 2 owners, and it drove a great outcome for them. So the way the deal was structured, we paid a pretty high day one price of around about 11 or 12 times that year's EBITDA. Then the earnout was on top of that. And in the end, after 2 years after the earnout was paid, we've ended up paying 7 times EBITDA. So it's worked really well for us. We've ended up with a great deal, but the owners got to lock in a really good price on day one and shared on the upside. So that worked really well. The reasons, if we go back to structuring the earnout, I think there were. So we spent quite a lot of time on sort of the rules of the earnout and the documentation pre-deal, both before exclusivity and then in the SPA. And some examples of the things that were in there were restrictions and rules around the type of growth that could qualify for the earnout. So in this case, if you want wholesale revenue, it's just carved out. We might choose to do that, but you're not going to get a multiple on that, on that what we perceive to be lower quality revenue. But we set margin limits, controls, segmentation rules, and that really worked to treat. Number 2, as Andy mentioned, we had full cost-based control, so they couldn't overinvest in the business and push EBITDA down in order to drive, revenue or GP. So that was clear. And another thing we had was actually the opening paragraph within the earnout part of the SPA was the sort of spirit of the partnership. It was a paragraph which says, we're not going to document everything here. We won't be able to, but big picture, this is what we're aiming at. So it was kind of this sort of trust and spirit at the beginning. And this worked because it was founders we'd had a 5-year relationship with. We really liked each other. We really trusted each other. And it worked an absolute treat. So if you invest the time up front for the right profile of deal, it can really work very well.
Yeah, and I think you kind of you segmented it quite nicely in terms of sort of the different business cases, and certainly if you're going to end up competing, that doesn't work. So moving on then to internationalization. I know Brett's where you've been waiting to get onto. So why don't we start with you? I guess just a piece of advice that you would give to a business looking to internationalize, and again, another sort of question, often it is sort of organic versus inorganic entry, so pros and cons.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, it is tough to organically enter and grow a business in the US, you know, coming from the UK or a European market, unless you have a customer set that's pretty international as well, meaning you have a UK or a European customer that also has a US presence that you can sort of follow into the US for that initial set of customers to sort of grow on. So that is one of the key questions that we're sort of thinking about and we're weighing about when we're helping to advise on organic entry versus acquisition. Is there a clear sort of first tranche of sort of customers in the US that you can target based on your existing customer base, or based on where your presence is. That doesn't mean that if that's not true, you can't go organically. It just may take longer to grow, and so that needs to be sort of recognized in how you're kind of forecasting that growth of that business in the new market. I think too, also sometimes it's just practically easier to enter the US through acquisition instead of organically. There's a lot of sort of considerations around incorporating a subsidiary business in the US and some of the administration around those first sort of US employees, that sometimes, the sort of easier way, especially, if you can get yourself a strong initial presence in the US, is to consider an acquisition, assuming that there are strong acquisition targets for you to look at in the US. So we'll kind of look at this question sort of in parallel. What would it look like to enter a country sort of organically? What would have to be true for that to be the right answer, while at the same time starting to map what that market of potential acquisitions could look like in the US. Making sure that if acquisition is the right answer, there are some clear targets that that we can start to pursue to help make that choice actionable.
And Brett, obviously you're sort of approaching this from a US perspective. Paul, I know you've kind of got a sort of broader European experience as well. Just sort of any thoughts there about kind of organic versus sort of inorganic?
I agree with everything Brett said there, and actually it's as relevant to the European markets as the US for us. So for context, we've entered Italy, the Benelux region, and the US in recent years via M&A, and we wouldn't enter a market organically these days. I mean, in our market, the customers are super sticky. We're typically aiming at SME customer bases. It's a local service model, so it's going to take years for us to build a relevant market position. So and the businesses we've bought have all taken 10 to 20 years to build a position that might be between 5 and 30 million of revenue. So it would just take too long. So I think for sticky services businesses, acquiring is the only way to sort of enter at scale. I think that may be very different if you're serving global customers, or you've got super large enterprise products, for example. But for us, yeah, M&A is the only way into some of these established markets.
Yeah, and anything kind of, I guess, sort of different there? I know, well, Moneypenny obviously started off in the US organically before Voice Nation, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, like I said before, 2014, and looked for a location. Chose Charleston because of the people there, the culture there. But actually had a really good history for missing those storms, because we provide a 24/7 service, so actually continuity of service is really important. what actually happened if there was a storm just in the nearest, whatever, 200 miles, everyone would still evacuate anyway and shut down. So it's those things with actually, and that's almost like the naivety of Brits going overseas and they're actually learning the lessons the hard way. So yeah, big fan of entering new territory, acquisition, and with that, you getting local management, you're getting local staff, you've got an established business in a good location. So when we acquired Voice Nation, it's half an hour outside downtown Atlanta. Atlanta is so well connected, big business hub, and that's worked really well for us. So that's just a prime example of how it works well. I agree with Paul's comment. If you've got global customer base, I've seen it works in another business where actually you can piggyback on the back of that to go into new territories. So that's maybe where it could work. But other than that, I'd look at acquisition.
Yeah, then of course it comes down to sort of availability of targets as well, which is going to influence that. The best will in the world, you can't sort of buy something if there's nothing to buy. I guess finally, and probably, I guess key learning from you, Annie, might be don't pick a sort of hurricane corridor when entering the US market. Anything else kind of talking about the US specifically here that you didn't appreciate, wish you'd known before when entering? Andy, probably starting with you and then over to Paul.
Yeah, that's fine. So, been doing business in the US and acquisitive activity in the US for 15 years, and still the opportunity and the scale and size there still always amazes me. So that's the first thing. And secondly, you need to execute well. So it is a competitive market. The market size is massive, but you still need to execute well. And to do that, you need good staff. And we're all similar in terms of our American friends and cousins, but actually there's still little nuances you need to get right. And we found that US leadership, US person works really well. Someone that can be that figurehead, that cultural leader, and that local US employees buy into is really important. So I'd say they were the main things, Skyler, in terms of the US.
Yeah. Paul, so anything to add there?
Similar themes, really. Not saying it's a surprise since we entered the US, but it really is a huge market. And the mid-market is huge. And there's a lot of big businesses that are really small in the US. So, and that I think underlines the opportunity really to do business there. What else to note? I think probably more so than European people and businesses, there's definitely a receptiveness to a very proactive sales and marketing model in the US. So we have no problems with our people, encouraging them and pushing towards a proactive sales and marketing model. And also I think businesses in the US, actually, they're so used to buying SaaS products, for example. So in our market, which in Europe has historically been a usage-based revenue market, in the US, it's gone straight to SaaS, and small businesses have got no problem paying for service on a $50 to $500 a month subscription basis. That's how they pay for everything they use as a business. So actually, it's a big opportunity in the US market, more than we maybe anticipated when we entered it. Just culturally, I guess I'd note, I think, and I think this is relevant to both buying a business and running a business. I think business owners and leadership teams are probably culturally more confident and salesy than we find in Europe. So I would encourage evidencing things with numbers and data as you go, right? So certainly from buying a business, I'd probably whereas you might take an answer from a European business owner and think, I'm pretty confident in that, I'd always just get the data to support it is the only thing I'd say. I don't know, Brett, if that's a fair comment.
It's absolutely a fair comment. Having lived and consulted in both the UK and various US markets, it is absolutely a fair comment.
Yeah, anything else to add as our resident North American, Brett, before we offend your sensibilities too much and sort of cultural commentary?
No, not at all. I think the big thing to sort of realize is that the US, appears like one massive homogenous market, but it really is, a state-based market. So as you're thinking about acquisition or even organic strategies, being very clear on levers of supply and demand by state what states are most attractive for your business, what customer end markets are going to be more attractive in the US than perhaps the UK, and what regulations, which are often state-based, may impact your go-to-market is going to be very, state by state. So, we're here to kind of help, parse a lot of that detail out so that, you can avoid, sort of any missteps in your US go-to-market.
Just Skyler, just a small one on the US for any of ECI's friends and family on here looking to start an M&A journey. The US is a more expensive place to do M&A. Value expectations are different. I think notably, entrepreneurs all seem to build their businesses to sell them, whereas what I've seen in Europe is the other way around. They build really good businesses, they love it, and at the right point they look at selling. But they're definitely used to building and selling and creating value. So it leads to some different conversations and a different way of going about M&A than in Europe, I think. Yeah,
that's a very fair point. Being prepared to pay up, of course. Sort of finally then onto integration, which I think is coming last, but actually some people say should kind of come first when you're thinking about doing M&A. And I guess on that sort of, what first in terms of integration, how much integration? Paul, should we start?
Sure. Huge topic. I think so. We spent a lot of time defining and refining our integration sort of timeline and work streams. Broadly, we break it into three buckets. So firstly, there's a set of onboarding things that anyone buying a company has to do, legal entity stuff, financial reporting, cash management. You need to clip through that and get through it. Everyone has to. For us, the area we've invested the most is kind of systems and data. So we've defined and chosen and sort of optimized a set of operating systems for running our business. So Salesforce, HubSpot, Tableau, NetSuite as an example. And really having a methodology of rolling these systems out to the acquired business in the right timeline. So if someone's got a really good CRM, it doesn't need to be replaced on day one. If someone hasn't got one, get it in. But sort of getting these businesses onto the systems that we use to run the businesses day to day is really, really valuable. It takes time, it's expensive, but at the end of it, you can actually drive the businesses. You can measure what the commercial teams are doing. You can measure the customer output. That's super important. Obviously, the final one for us is platform, and that end platform integration and migration is a huge thing, and that takes years to get right and do. You can't rush that, and that's bespoke in each case. But for us, that middle layer of systems and data is absolutely vital.
And Andy, sort of similarly, how have you kind of thought about that at Moneypenny?
Yeah, we're lucky. We have a small business change team, so made up of 3 or 4 project managers with different projects we've got going on throughout the business. So first thing is appoint a project manager on that integration. Just be really clear who's managing it, the ownership of each tranche post acquisition. But having a PM run that makes such a big difference. They'll hold everyone accountable, everyone to task, and it will run so much more smoothly. And then just have that clear plan. Again, so everyone's aligned on it. And actually, if management is staying, then have them bought into that plan as well. It's really, really important that they buy into that plan if you want them to stick around, and listen to them as well. Listen to their ideas. They know that business. They know how it works. Respect them and do listen to them. And probably another place, an area that we've learned from is really winning the hearts and minds of the staff that are staying. Get them bought into you. So spend some time with them, present to them what does the greater Moneypenny group bring to the smaller business in the US, why we've bought them, what's the opportunity, and at a high level, and the benefits they'll see in terms of potential career progression, stability, and we've learned from that, and we've developed that a little bit, but that's been important. And I'd echo Paul's comments around platform. If get everything singing off the same platforms, the same hymn sheet, it just becomes so much easier then to monitor, and then equally it's the same language from group company to group company.
Yeah, and I remember someone once talking about that communication as the good news phone call, and it's, you want to be able to call your clients and say, great news, we've sort of joined, you know, Moneypenny, Commify, as well as also your staff. And if when you start thinking about that sort of particular transaction, you can't do the good news phone call. It says a lot, doesn't it, about cultural fit. Brett, just, I know actually from a ECI standpoint, you're often involved on the integration side. Anything kind of to add in terms of, you know, how much, what first?
Yeah, I'll be brief here. I mean, we do have a toolkit for that, so we can always talk about our integration toolkit. But I think the earlier the planning happens, the better. I think we encourage our businesses, you know, to build it, you know, collaboratively with us. We're you know, from a resourcing perspective, which we may touch on, you know, we're happy to, you know, to provide support there. If there's sort of less experience with integrations, you know, if they're, you know, if it's a business like Commify that's done a lot of acquisitions and, you know, has its, you know, integration sort of capabilities sort of well honed, they may need, you know, less support. But we're always there to help. And, you know, what we want to see is a, you know, good integration plan with clear timelines, you know, clear, you know, defined delivery teams, sort of clear scope of what's in plan for integration, what's not, and when. And as long as, you know, we see those sort of, you know, components, you know, we feel confident that, you know, that integration will run smoothly, or at least we have processes in place to, you know, to manage bumps along the road.
Yeah, and Andy, you sort of touched on actually kind of resourcing in that sort of integration plan. Paul, how do you think about that, and any learnings, anything you'd sort of resource differently going forward?
I echo what Andy said earlier. I mean, integration is about people, and you need proper project management. So actually, probably the sorts of people who are going to be good at M&A are probably not going to be the sorts of people who are good at project managing and integration. Just culturally, it's not my strength, but we have colleagues that are really good at it. So I think it's a different skill set. I mean, really, what I said at the top of the call, you can't just rely on your good people operationally to deliver integration. That it can work in pockets, but it's not scalable. So you do need dedicated resource. From our point of view, you know, with the ECI's backing and our M&A ambitions for the next few years, we're building out our integration capability, and that is both sort of project management of those efforts and also departmental integration leads. So a commercial integration lead, a technical integration lead, and a finance integration lead. So that will be one team under kind of transformation director, but have the agency into the commercial department so that the CXOs know what's happening in their area, and they're doing what those people are doing, what they want in their area. So it's a bit of a matrix, but yeah, it needs dedicated investment.
And what about, again, sort of from both your perspectives, you've made a number of acquisitions, so it does make sense to invest in that team, to invest in that resource. If you're making your first acquisition, you don't necessarily have that sort of team. You know, how do you resource the people you already have?
I mean, there's ways of getting dedicated resources that aren't, you know, from outside, right? So I'd certainly lean on ECI and ECI's experience. You can hire really good people on contracts, you know, for a period of time. There's lots of options to do it, but it will be, you know, it's certainly working with your existing teams, but it's going to be very hard for your existing teams to lead and do it all themselves.
Yeah, I agree with Paul. If you could, I'd recruit a PM, even if just for a contract, just to give control of that project. And then it is trying to carve out a little bit of time from the key people in your internal team to spend on the integration. They know the current business, they know what works well. I think bringing people into that externally can be quite difficult unless they're very, very experienced. So yeah, recruiting probably a contract PM as a starter would be very helpful.
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
Skyler, being obviously M&A related stuff is not ongoing things. So right, so use your P&L on the line items appropriately. If we're all happy to spend X millions on buying a business, you can exceptionalize or put below the lines some resources to do the integration, and then that goes away. So this isn't putting extra above the line costs into a business. It's really making sure that the investment you make is returning the right investment.
Yeah. Well, I think that covers the pre-prepared questions we had for today. We've got a bit of time for some Q&A. I've got a question here from Ray Berry at Cypher to just sort of kick this off. So this is to both Andy and Paul here. So the question is, how would you, if indeed you would, approach an acquisition for technology or capability sort of differently to how you're approaching sort of acquisitions for scale? And I guess that's in terms of sort of deal shape, but also in terms of sort of strategy to acquire.
Yes, we've not actually done an acquisition in terms of different technology. What I would say, we have looked at 2 or 3. I think it's understanding the business case and what that technology will bring to, so for example, Moneypenny in our instance, and what will that look like in 2 to 3 years as well, in terms of what's the investment going to be required in that technology to future-proof it and make sure it's still relevant, and can you deliver that? So I'd say that. The other thing I'd say is, I know potentially could first prove it out, actually makes that business case more robust. So that's what I'd say from my probably limited experience of not having done one, but having looked at 2 or 3.
We're in exactly the same boat as Andy. We've not done any deals which were particularly new product driven, but we have looked at probably half a dozen over the years in depth, and really thought about them. They're definitely more complicated. And you need a completely different integration strategy and business plan. In a product or a market that you're not present in, keeping the founders or finding an interesting product-driven role is going to be more important than it would do in a sort of a normal acquisition. So they're complicated, but they can be really interesting. We've looked really hard at a few. It's certainly interesting and good fun, but it does need a bespoke and a different way of thinking.
Yeah, and Brett, anything to sort of add there? Again, sort of experience, pre-ECI with sort of ECI portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul and Andy sort of covered it in terms of thinking through the thesis of what you're getting from that acquisition, what the plan is going to look like, both from an integration standpoint and from a growth standpoint afterwards. It's just a number of different dynamics that you need to consider. I'd say that the nice thing is that we do have businesses across our portfolio that have looked at acquisitions that are more about a new technology or a capability, so we can bring the lessons learned and the experiences to bear in terms of advising or supporting businesses that are looking at those types of acquisitions.
Great. I think we've got time for one more. So quickly, this is from Scott Woolaway. Post-completion, are there any common staffing reactions experienced, and how would you recommend planning for these? So, Andy, should we start with you quickly and then over to you, Paul, in sort of 30 seconds?
Have a little communications plan, and if you can, agree with the vendors. And again, if you get on site with people, meet them in the flesh, meet them in person, talk to them about the rationale, and give them confidence in the future, because their world's been made wobbly and insecure. So actually, if you can give them that, that's the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, I agree. It's stressful times for everyone involved, so you need to get in front of it.
Perfect. Well, I think that's pretty much all we've got time for today. Thank you all for coming on board as panelists, making the time. And I'm sure from our side at ECI, very happy to answer any additional questions after this if people have them. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Skyler.
you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Skyler.
Take care all.